Deep in the heart of Central Africa, where ancient rivers carve through impenetrable wilderness and mist clings to towering canopies, something extraordinary might be lurking, something that defies everything we thought we knew about extinction, evolution, and the natural world. For over a century, explorers, scientists, and local communities have whispered about encounters with a creature so impossible, so mind-bending, that it challenges the very foundation of modern biology. Picture this. You're paddling down a murky tributary of the Congo River, surrounded by walls of green so thick that sunlight barely penetrates to the water's surface. The air is heavy, humid, filled with the calls of countless unseen creatures. Then suddenly, the jungle falls silent. The water begins to ripple, and from the depths emerges something that shouldn't exist in our modern world. A long serpentine neck rises above the surface, followed by a massive body that displaces water like a living island. For a moment, time seems to stop. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the creature vanishes beneath the dark waters, leaving only ripples and the haunting question that has puzzled researchers for generations. What you've just witnessed might be Mokele-Mbembe, a name that translates to one who stops the flow of rivers. According to countless eyewitness accounts spanning more than 100 years, this legendary beast represents something that modern science insists is impossible. A living dinosaur hiding in plain sight in one of Earth's most remote and unexplored regions. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. This isn't just some random folklore or campfire story. We're talking about consistent, detailed reports from multiple independent sources spanning different time periods, different expeditions, and different cultural backgrounds. German explorers in the early 1900s documented encounters with local tribes who described the creature with remarkable precision. British expeditions in the 1980s collected testimonies that matched descriptions given decades earlier by people who had never met. American cryptozoologists have spent fortunes organizing elaborate searches equipped with sonar technology and underwater cameras, all chasing the same elusive prey. The descriptions are eerily consistent across these diverse accounts. Witnesses describe a brownish-gray creature with smooth, almost leathery skin. The neck is incredibly long and flexible, capable of extending high above the water's surface or snaking through dense vegetation. The body is massive, comparable in size to an elephant or perhaps even larger, with a long, muscular tail that some witnesses compare to that of an alligator. Most intriguingly, many reports mention a single long tooth or horn protruding from the creature's head. Now, before you dismiss this as pure fantasy, consider the source of these reports. We're not talking about tourists looking for Instagram moments or thrill seekers chasing internet fame. Many of these accounts come from seasoned explorers, trained naturalists, and indigenous communities whose survival has depended for generations on intimate knowledge of their local wildlife. These are people who can distinguish between a hippopotamus, a crocodile, and every other large animal that calls the Congo Basin home. When they describe something completely different, something that doesn't match any known species, that demands our attention. The scientific community remains deeply divided on this mystery. Mainstream paleontology insists that large dinosaurs went extinct approximately 65 million years ago, wiped out by the same catastrophic event that ended the age of reptiles. The idea that a population of sauropod dinosaurs could survive undetected in modern Africa strikes many researchers as not just unlikely, but impossible. Where would they hide? What would they eat? How could they maintain a breeding population without leaving behind concrete evidence like bones, teeth, or definitive photographic proof? Yet cryptozoologists present compelling counterarguments. The Congo Basin represents one of Earth's last truly unexplored frontiers, covering over 1.5 million square miles of dense rainforest, swampland, and river systems. Vast areas remain completely unmapped and uninhabited by humans. New species of mammals, birds, and reptiles are discovered in this region every year, proving that nature still holds secrets we haven't uncovered. If any ecosystem on Earth could harbor a relic population of prehistoric creatures, the Congo would be the perfect candidate. The habitat certainly seems suitable. The region's climate has remained relatively stable for millions of years, providing the kind of consistent tropical environment that large herbivorous creatures would need to survive. The dense vegetation offers both food sources and concealment. The extensive river systems provide water, transportation corridors, and additional food in the form of aquatic plants. Most importantly, human presence remains minimal across huge swaths of the territory, leaving plenty of space for large animals to live and breed without detection. Local folklore adds another fascinating dimension to this mystery. The concept of Mokele-Mbembe isn't some recent invention or modern myth. Stories of river monsters and forest dragons permeate traditional cultures throughout Central Africa, passed down through generations long before any European explorer set foot in the region. These aren't vague monster stories, but detailed descriptions of specific creatures with consistent behavioral patterns and habitat preferences. According to traditional accounts, Mokele-Mbembe is primarily herbivorous, with a particular fondness for a type of vine that produces large white flowers. Local guides have actually shown researchers paths through the forest where they claim the creature travels to reach these preferred feeding areas. The tracks they point out are certainly intriguing, showing evidence of something large and heavy moving through vegetation, though skeptics argue these could be made by known animals like elephants or hippos. The creature is also described as highly territorial and aggressive toward humans. Traditional stories warn that Mokele-Mbembe will attack canoes and boats that venture too close to its territory, using its massive size and strength to overturn vessels and potentially harm their occupants. This behavioral description actually aligns with what we know about large herbivorous animals in the wild. Despite their plant-based diets, creatures like hippos and elephants can be incredibly dangerous when they feel threatened or when humans encroach on their territory. What makes these traditional accounts particularly compelling is their specificity about habitat. Local communities don't describe Mokele-Mbembe as living throughout the entire Congo region. Instead, they point to specific areas, particular lakes, certain river bends, and isolated swampy regions where encounters are most likely to occur. This kind of precise geographic knowledge suggests intimate familiarity with the creature's behavior patterns and preferred environment. Multiple expeditions have focused their searches on these traditional hotspots, particularly a remote lake surrounded by pristine jungle that appears again and again in eyewitness accounts. The location is so isolated that reaching it requires days of travel through unmarked wilderness, far from any human settlement or modern transportation. Teams equipped with sophisticated sonar equipment have detected large underwater objects moving through the lake's depths, though nothing conclusive enough to definitively prove the creature's existence. The tantalizing nature of this evidence represents perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the entire mystery. We have sonar readings that show something large moving underwater. We have consistent eyewitness testimonies spanning multiple generations and cultural groups. We have traditional knowledge that points to specific locations and behavioral patterns. We have photographic evidence that's intriguing, but never quite clear enough to be definitive. We have audio recordings of unusual sounds from deep in the jungle that don't match any known animal. Yet we still lack that one piece of absolute proof that would satisfy the scientific establishment. This evidence gap has led some researchers to propose alternative explanations for the Mokele-Mbembe phenomenon. Perhaps witnesses are encountering known animals under unusual circumstances, misidentifying familiar creatures seen from unexpected angles or in poor lighting conditions. The human brain, after all, has a remarkable tendency primed to expect something extraordinary. Another theory suggests that environmental to fill in gaps in sensory information, especially when we're already changes in the Congo Basin, might be bringing normally reclusive animals into contact with humans more frequently than in the past. As human settlements expand deeper into previously untouched wilderness, encounters with rare or unusual wildlife become more likely. What people interpret as sightings of unknown creatures might actually represent first-time human contact with extremely elusive known species. Yet these rational explanations struggle to account for the consistency and specificity of witness descriptions. If people were simply misidentifying known animals, wouldn't we expect more variation in their accounts? Wouldn't some witnesses describe creatures that sound like hippos, others like crocodiles, and still others like elephants? Instead, we see remarkable consistency across independent sources, all describing the same basic creature with the same distinctive features and behaviors. The mystery deepens when we consider the broader context of species discovery in the Congo region. Scientists estimate that hundreds, possibly thousands of species remain undiscovered in this vast ecosystem. New mammals are found regularly, including large primates, that were completely unknown to science just decades ago. If the region can hide populations of previously unknown apes, why not other large animals? The discovery of living coelacanths in the 1930s proved that creatures thought extinct for millions of years could survive undetected in remote environments. These living fossils had been presumed extinct since the Cretaceous period until a specimen was caught off the coast of South Africa, completely revolutionizing our understanding of species, survival, and extinction. The coelacanth discovery demonstrated that our knowledge of what's possible in terms of species survival remains incomplete, leaving room for other extraordinary possibilities. Modern DNA sequencing technology has opened new possibilities for investigating the Mokele-Mbembe mystery. Environmental DNA sampling, where scientists collect water or soil samples to detect genetic material left behind by animals, could theoretically provide evidence of unknown species without requiring direct contact. Several recent expeditions have incorporated this cutting-edge technology, collecting samples from lakes and rivers where sightings have been reported. The results so far have been inconclusive, detecting DNA from known species like crocodiles, hippos, and various fish, but nothing that suggests the presence of an unknown large reptile. However, the absence of environmental DNA evidence doesn't necessarily disprove the creature's existence. Many factors can affect DNA preservation in tropical environments, including temperature, acidity levels, and the presence of microorganisms that break down genetic material rapidly. If Mokele-Mbembe exists in very small numbers and spends most of its time in deep water or secluded areas, the chances of detecting its DNA in random samples would be significantly reduced. The behavioral patterns described by witnesses also raise intriguing questions about the creature's lifestyle and survival strategies. Reports consistently describe Mokele-Mbembe as primarily aquatic, spending most of its time submerged and only occasionally surfacing or coming onto land. This behavior would make sense for a large animal trying to avoid detection in an environment where human activity is increasing. Staying underwater provides both concealment and protection from the intense tropical heat that can stress large-bodied animals. Witnesses also describe the creature as most active during specific times, particularly during the wet season when river levels are highest and the forest is most lush. This seasonal pattern could explain why sightings are relatively rare and why scientific expeditions don't always succeed in locating the animal. If Mokele-Mbembe follows predictable migration routes or seasonal behaviors, timing would be crucial for any successful encounter. The dietary preferences attributed to the creature present another fascinating aspect of the mystery. Traditional accounts consistently describe Mokele-Mbembe as herbivorous, feeding primarily on aquatic vegetation and specific types of vines and fruits. This plant-based diet would actually make evolutionary sense for a large animal trying to remain hidden. Herbivores can often survive in smaller numbers than predators because they don't require the extensive territory needed to support hunting behavior. A small population of large herbivores could theoretically sustain itself indefinitely in a rich forest environment without depleting their food sources. Local guides have shown researchers specific plants that they claim attract Mokele-Mbembe, including a vine that produces large, white, fragrant flowers. The scientific names for these plants have been documented, and interestingly, they're all species that would provide excellent nutrition for large herbivorous animals. The flowers are rich in sugars and proteins, while the leaves and stems contain essential minerals and vitamins. If these feeding preferences are accurate, they suggest that Mokele-Mbembe has evolved specific dietary adaptations to its forest environment. The creature's alleged territorial behavior also fits patterns we see in other large herbivores. Despite their plant-based diets, animals like hippos and elephants can be extremely aggressive when defending their territory or protecting their young. The reports of Mokele-Mbembe attacking boats and canoes might represent defensive behavior rather than predatory aggression. If humans are increasingly encroaching on the creature's territory, defensive reactions would be entirely expected. Some researchers have noted that the timing of increased Mokele-Mbembe sightings correlates with periods of political instability and conflict in the region. During times of war or civil unrest, normal human activities like fishing, logging, and hunting are disrupted, potentially allowing normally reclusive animals to expand their range or become more active in areas they usually avoid. When peace returns and human activity resumes, these animals might retreat to more remote areas, explaining the cyclical nature of sighting reports. The psychological aspects of the Mokele-Mbembe phenomenon also deserve consideration. The human fascination with dinosaurs and prehistoric life runs deep, tapping into childhood wonder and our collective imagination about the distant past. This emotional connection might make people more likely to interpret ambiguous encounters as evidence of surviving prehistoric creatures. At the same time, dismissing witness accounts solely on psychological grounds risks overlooking genuine discoveries. The indigenous communities of the Congo Basin possess knowledge systems that have been developed and refined over thousands of years. Their understanding of local wildlife, seasonal patterns, and environmental changes represents a form of expertise that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. When these communities consistently report encounters with a specific type of unknown animal, their testimonies deserve serious consideration rather than dismissal. Cultural anthropologists have studied how traditional knowledge systems categorize and describe different types of animals. In many African cultures, there are distinct linguistic and conceptual categories for different types of creatures, with specific terms for water animals, forest animals, dangerous animals, and mythical beings. The fact that Mokele-Mbembe is consistently described using terminology typically reserved for real, physical animals rather than supernatural entities suggests that local communities view it as a genuine creature rather than a spiritual or mythological being. The economic implications of the Mokele-Mbembe mystery have also influenced research efforts. The potential discovery of a living dinosaur would represent one of the most significant scientific breakthroughs in history, with enormous implications for our understanding of evolution, extinction, and biodiversity. Such a discovery would undoubtedly generate massive international attention, potentially bringing tourism revenue and research funding to the region. This economic incentive has motivated numerous expeditions and continues to attract researchers despite the lack of conclusive evidence. However, the same economic pressures that make the discovery attractive also create incentives for hoaxes and exaggerated claims. The line between legitimate scientific research and sensationalized monster hunting can become blurred when significant financial interests are involved. This commercialization of the mystery has led some serious researchers to distance themselves from Mokele-Mbembe investigations, viewing the field as too contaminated by publicity seekers and amateur enthusiasts. The technological evolution of search methods has dramatically changed how researchers approach the Mokele-Mbembe mystery. Early expeditions relied primarily on eyewitness accounts and basic tracking techniques. Modern investigations incorporate sophisticated equipment, including underwater cameras, motion-activated trail cameras, acoustic monitoring devices, and satellite imagery analysis. Drone technology has made it possible to survey vast areas of previously inaccessible terrain, while underwater remotely operated vehicles can explore lake and river depths that human divers cannot safely reach. Despite these technological advances, the fundamental challenge remains the same. The Congo Basin covers an area larger than the entire United States east of the Mississippi River, most of which remains completely unexplored by modern science. Even with satellite imagery and sophisticated equipment, the chances of locating a small population of reclusive animals in such a vast area remain incredibly small. The dense forest canopy blocks most aerial observation, while the murky water in rivers and lakes severely limits underwater visibility. The seasonal flooding patterns of the Congo region add another layer of complexity to any search efforts. During the wet season, vast areas of forest become temporarily aquatic, creating an interconnected system of waterways that could allow large animals to travel between previously isolated areas. When the floods recede, these temporary water highways disappear, potentially stranding animals in areas where they wouldn't normally be found. This dynamic environment makes it extremely difficult to predict where encounters might occur or to establish consistent monitoring locations. Recent advances in acoustic monitoring have opened new possibilities for detecting large unknown animals. Every species produces distinctive sound signatures, from breathing patterns to movement sounds to vocalizations. Researchers have deployed networks of underwater microphones and forest recording devices in areas where Mokele-Mbembe sightings have been reported. While these devices have captured numerous interesting sounds that don't match known species, none have provided definitive evidence of the creature's existence. The international scientific community's response to Mokele-Mbembe research has been mixed, with mainstream institutions generally maintaining skeptical positions while acknowledging the theoretical possibility of undiscovered large species. Several respected universities have provided limited funding for expeditions, treating them as biodiversity surveys rather than cryptozoological investigations. This approach has led to legitimate scientific discoveries, including several new species of smaller animals, even when the primary target remained elusive. The political situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo has significantly impacted research efforts over the decades. Periods of civil war, government instability, and regional conflicts have made large portions of the country inaccessible to international researchers. Even during peaceful periods, obtaining permits and ensuring safe passage through remote areas requires extensive coordination with local authorities and communities. These logistical challenges have limited the scope and duration of many expeditions, preventing the kind of long-term systematic study that would be necessary to definitively resolve the mystery. Climate change and environmental degradation present additional challenges for both the creature's potential survival and research efforts. The Congo Basin has experienced significant ecological changes over the past century, including deforestation, mining activities, and shifting rainfall patterns. If Mokele-Mbembe truly exists, these environmental pressures could be pushing the species toward extinction, even as researchers desperately try to document its existence. The irony is profound. We might be racing against time to discover a creature that's simultaneously being driven toward oblivion by human activities. The impact of industrial development in the region cannot be understated. Logging operations have penetrated deeper into previously untouched forest areas, while mining companies have established operations along remote rivers and lakes. These activities don't just destroy habitat directly, they also increase human presence in areas that might have served as refuges for reclusive species. The noise, pollution, and general disruption associated with industrial activities could force any surviving large animals to retreat even further into increasingly fragmented wilderness areas. Water pollution represents another serious concern. The Congo River system has become increasingly contaminated with agricultural runoff, mining waste, and industrial chemicals. For an aquatic or semi-aquatic creature like the described Mokele-Mbembe, water quality would be absolutely critical for survival. Declining water quality could explain why sightings have become less frequent in recent decades if the creature's preferred habitats are becoming uninhabitable. The fragmentation of forest habitat creates what ecologists call island effects, where small populations become isolated from each other and lose genetic diversity over time. If Mokele-Mbembe exists in small numbers distributed across the Congo Basin, habitat fragmentation could prevent different groups from interbreeding, ultimately leading to population collapse. This ecological reality adds urgency to research efforts, suggesting that any window for discovery might be rapidly closing. Local communities have reported changes in animal behavior and distribution patterns that align with these environmental pressures. Older residents describe how certain areas that once teemed with wildlife have become eerily quiet, while animals that were once predictable in their habits have become increasingly erratic in their movements. These observations suggest that the entire ecosystem is under stress, which would inevitably affect any large species trying to survive in the region. The role of traditional ecological knowledge becomes even more crucial in this context. Indigenous communities possess detailed understanding of environmental changes that have occurred over generations. Their observations about shifting animal populations, changing river patterns, and forest degradation provide invaluable context for understanding how environmental pressures might affect unknown species. When these communities report that sightings of unusual creatures have become less frequent, their testimony carries significant weight. Photography and video technology have evolved dramatically since the early days of Modern smartphones and digital cameras are capable of capturing high-resolution images and videos that would be virtually impossible to fake convincingly. The fact that no such definitive documentation has emerged despite the proliferation of recording devices raises questions about the creature's current status. Either the animal has become incredibly rare, has learned to avoid human contact more effectively, or the interpretation of earlier sightings requires re-evaluation. The psychology of expectation plays a complex role in how people interpret unusual encounters in the wilderness. When individuals venture into remote areas specifically hoping to encounter Mokele-Mbembe, their heightened state of anticipation might influence how they process ambiguous sensory information. A partially submerged log, a distant splash, or an unusual shadow could be interpreted as evidence of the creature when viewed through the lens of expectation. This psychological factor doesn't invalidate all witness accounts, but it does highlight the importance of critical evaluation. Conversely, the fear and awe associated with potential encounters might cause some witnesses to minimize or dismiss their experiences. The cultural significance of Mokele-Mbembe in local folklore means that claiming an encounter carries social and spiritual implications beyond simple wildlife observation. Some individuals might choose not to report sightings to avoid unwanted attention, or because they view such encounters as private spiritual experiences rather than scientific data points. The evolution of expedition methodology reflects growing sophistication in cryptozoological research. Early expeditions often resembled adventure tourism more than scientific investigation, with limited planning and equipment. Modern efforts incorporate rigorous scientific protocols, including control groups, standardized observation methods, and peer review processes. This evolution has lent greater credibility to recent research while simultaneously making the absence of definitive results more significant. Interdisciplinary collaboration has become increasingly important in Mokele-Mbembe research. Teams now include not just cryptozoologists and adventure seekers, but also anthropologists studying local cultures, ecologists examining habitat conditions, and technology specialists operating sophisticated equipment. This collaborative approach has produced valuable scientific knowledge even when the primary target remains elusive, contributing to our understanding of Congo Basin biodiversity and ecosystem dynamics. The question of what constitutes sufficient proof for extraordinary claims remains contentious within the scientific community. The standard for accepting the existence of a previously unknown large vertebrate species is necessarily high, requiring multiple forms of corroborating evidence, including physical specimens, clear photographic documentation, and reproducible observations. This high standard serves to prevent the acceptance of false discoveries, but it also means that genuine discoveries of extremely rare or elusive species face significant evidentiary hurdles. Alternative explanations for the Mokele-Mbembe phenomenon continue to evolve as our understanding of Congo Basin ecology improves. Some researchers propose that witnesses might be encountering known species exhibiting unusual behavior due to environmental stress or genetic abnormalities. Others suggest that traditional accounts might represent cultural memories of actual prehistoric creatures, passed down through oral history over thousands of years and now projected onto contemporary wildlife encounters. The possibility of hybrid animals or unusual subspecies adds another dimension to the mystery. The Congo Basin's complex evolutionary history and diverse microenvironments could theoretically produce unusual variants of known species that differ significantly from their typical relatives. Such variants might appear strange enough to observers to be interpreted as completely different species, especially when encountered briefly or under poor viewing conditions. Seasonal migration patterns could also explain the sporadic nature of sightings. Many large African animals follow predictable migration routes based on water availability, food sources, and breeding cycles. If Mokele-Mbembe represents a real but extremely rare species, it might only appear in certain areas during specific seasons, making encounters highly unpredictable and difficult to document systematically. The impact of human displacement and conflict on wildlife observation patterns deserves consideration. Political instability in the region has displaced many local communities who possessed intimate knowledge of their local environments. When these traditional knowledge holders are forced to relocate, their detailed understanding of animal behavior and habitat use is lost, potentially explaining why recent expeditions have been less successful in locating areas where encounters were previously reported. Commercial exploitation concerns have influenced how researchers approach the Mokele-Mbembe mystery. The potential discovery of a living dinosaur would undoubtedly attract massive international attention, with significant implications for tourism, media coverage, and scientific funding. However, this same attention could prove disastrous for the species if it actually exists. The sudden influx of visitors, researchers, and media representatives could destroy fragile habitat and disturb animal behavior patterns, potentially driving the species to extinction through human interference. Conservation implications extend beyond the creature itself to encompass the entire ecosystem it would inhabit. Areas identified as potential Mokele-Mbembe habitat represent some of the last remaining pristine wilderness in Central Africa. Whether or not the legendary creature actually exists, these areas deserve protection for their biodiversity value and ecological importance. The search for Mokele-Mbembe has helped focus attention on conservation needs in remote areas that might otherwise be overlooked by international environmental organizations. The role of citizen science in modern cryptozoological research has expanded significantly with the advent of social media and mobile communication technologies. Local residents can now instantly share observations, photographs, and videos with researchers around the world, creating a vast network of potential witnesses and data collectors. This democratization of research participation has both positive and negative implications, increasing the volume of reported sightings while also making it more difficult to verify the accuracy and reliability of individual reports. Educational outreach has become an increasingly important component of Mokele-Mbembe research efforts. Teams working in the region often incorporate environmental education and conservation awareness programs into their expeditions, sharing scientific knowledge with local communities while learning from traditional ecological expertise. These cultural exchanges benefit both scientific research and local conservation efforts, creating lasting positive impacts regardless of whether the primary research objectives are achieved. The intersection of traditional beliefs and modern science continues to shape how the Mokele-Mbembe mystery is investigated and interpreted. Respectful collaboration between international researchers and local communities requires careful navigation of cultural sensitivities while maintaining scientific rigor. This balance becomes particularly important when dealing with creatures that hold spiritual or cultural significance beyond their potential biological reality. Technological limitations still constrain research efforts despite remarkable advances in available equipment, the dense forest canopy blocks, satellite observation, murky water limits, underwater visibility, and the vast scale of the search area makes comprehensive surveys practically impossible. Even the most sophisticated equipment has limited range and effectiveness in the challenging environmental conditions of the Congo Basin, leaving vast areas essentially unexplored despite decades of research effort. The funding challenges facing Mokele-Mbembe research reflect broader issues in cryptozoological investigation. Traditional scientific funding sources remain skeptical of investing in searches for unproven species, while private funding often comes with expectations for publicity or commercial exploitation that can compromise research integrity. This financial constraint limits the scope and duration of expeditions, preventing the kind of long-term systematic study that would be most likely to produce definitive results. As we stand at this fascinating crossroads between possibility and probability, between ancient mysteries and modern science, the question remains tantalizingly open. The absence of definitive proof doesn't constitute proof of absence, especially in one of Earth's most remote and unexplored regions. Whether Mokele-Mbembe represents a surviving prehistoric creature, an unknown species yet to be classified by science, or a complex cultural phenomenon that reveals important truths about human imagination and our relationship with the natural world, the mystery continues to captivate researchers and adventurers alike. The search itself has produced valuable scientific knowledge about Congo Basin ecology, contributed to conservation awareness, and demonstrated the importance of respecting traditional knowledge systems. Perhaps these secondary benefits justify continued investigation regardless of whether the primary target is ever found. In a world where new species are discovered regularly while others disappear before science can document them, maintaining an open mind about extraordinary possibilities seems not just reasonable, but essential. The story of Mokele-Mbembe ultimately reflects humanity's eternal fascination with the unknown and our deep-seated hope that our planet still harbors secrets waiting to be unveiled. In an age of satellite imagery and genetic sequencing, the possibility that something remarkable might still be hiding in the depths of an African river captures our collective imagination and reminds us that mystery and wonder haven't entirely disappeared from our increasingly mapped and measured world. The financial incentives driving Mokele-Mbembe research create a fascinating web of competing interests that both fuel and complicate scientific investigation. Documentary filmmakers, book publishers, and television networks have invested millions of dollars in expeditions, driven by public fascination with the possibility of discovering a living dinosaur. This commercial interest provides crucial funding for research that might otherwise be impossible, but it also creates pressure to produce dramatic results rather than careful scientific analysis. Teams funded by media companies often face expectations to deliver compelling footage and exciting narratives, even when the reality of field research involves long periods of methodical observation with minimal action. The entertainment industry's portrayal of cryptozoological research has shaped public expectations in ways that sometimes hinder genuine scientific investigation. Popular documentaries and reality shows often emphasize the adventure aspects of expeditions while downplaying the tedious, systematic work that characterizes legitimate research. This media representation attracts thrill seekers and amateur investigators who may lack the patience and expertise necessary for effective field work, potentially interfering with more serious efforts. Social media has revolutionized how information about Mokele-Mbembe spreads and evolves. Eyewitness accounts can now reach global audiences within hours, accompanied by photographs and videos that may support or contradict their claims. However, the same technology that enables rapid information sharing also facilitates the creation and distribution of hoaxes. Digital manipulation tools make it increasingly difficult to distinguish authentic evidence from fabricated content, raising the evidentiary bar even higher for researchers seeking to document extraordinary claims. The democratization of research through social media has also created new opportunities for legitimate scientific discovery. Local residents equipped with smartphones can document unusual wildlife encounters and share them instantly with researchers worldwide. This crowdsourced approach to data collection has already contributed to the discovery of several new species in remote regions, proving that citizen scientists can make valuable contributions to formal research efforts. Climate change adds another layer of complexity to the Mokele-Mbembe mystery by fundamentally altering the ecosystem where the creature allegedly lives. Rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and shifting seasonal cycles affect everything from water levels to vegetation growth to animal behavior. If a small population of large animals was barely maintaining itself in marginal habitat, even minor environmental changes could tip the balance toward extinction. Conversely, climate change might force normally reclusive animals to alter their behavior patterns in ways that make encounters with humans more likely. The ecological concept of carrying capacity becomes crucial when considering whether the Congo Basin could support a population of large, unknown animals. Every ecosystem has limits to how many large herbivores it can sustain based on available food resources, territory requirements, and environmental conditions. Mathematical models suggest that maintaining a genetically viable population of creatures the size described in Mokele-Mbembe accounts would require a substantial amount of pristine habitat and abundant food sources. As human activities continue to fragment and degrade forest ecosystems, the theoretical carrying capacity for such animals steadily decreases. Genetic diversity represents another critical factor in the survival of small animal populations. Species reduced to very small numbers often suffer from inbreeding depression, where limited genetic variation leads to increased susceptibility to disease, reduced fertility, and other problems that can drive populations toward extinction. If Mokele-Mbembe exists in the small numbers suggested by the rarity of sightings, the species might already be caught in an extinction vortex, where declining numbers lead to reduced genetic diversity, which in turn makes the population even less viable. The concept of evolutionary relics adds scientific legitimacy to speculation about surviving prehistoric species. The discovery of living coelacanths proved that animals thought extinct for millions of years could persist in isolated environments. Similarly, the recent identification of new large mammal species in remote areas demonstrates that our catalog of Earth's biodiversity remains incomplete. The Congo Basin's unique evolutionary history, characterized by long periods of climate stability and geographic isolation, provides exactly the conditions where relict populations might survive. Biogeographic analysis reveals that the Congo Basin has served as a refugium during past climate changes, preserving species that disappeared elsewhere. During ice ages and other global environmental upheavals, the region's tropical climate remained relatively stable, allowing plants and animals to persist while their relatives elsewhere faced extinction. This historical role as a biological sanctuary strengthens the theoretical case for the region harboring surviving representatives of otherwise extinct lineages. The fossil record from Central Africa remains frustratingly incomplete, largely due to the region's geology and climate conditions that don't favor fossil preservation. Most of what we know about prehistoric African fauna comes from sites in eastern and southern Africa, leaving a significant gap in our understanding of what lived in the Congo Basin millions of years ago. This knowledge gap makes it impossible to definitively state what species might or might not have survived in the region's forests and rivers. Archaeological evidence suggests that human populations in Central Africa have remained relatively small and scattered throughout much of prehistory, unlike other regions where large settlements and extensive agriculture transformed entire landscapes. This pattern of low-density human occupation would have left vast areas of wilderness essentially undisturbed until very recent times, providing potential refuge space for elusive species. The linguistic analysis of traditional names and descriptions for Mokele-Mbembe reveals consistent patterns across different ethnic groups and languages in the region. Comparative studies show that similar terms and concepts appear in the oral traditions of communities separated by hundreds of miles and different linguistic families. This consistency suggests either shared cultural origins for the stories or independent observations of the same phenomenon, both of which lend credibility to the accounts. Ethnobiological research, which studies how different cultures categorize and understand the natural world, provides valuable context for interpreting traditional accounts of unknown animals. Indigenous classification systems often include categories and distinctions that don't align with Western scientific taxonomy, but reflect deep ecological knowledge, developed through generations of direct observation. When multiple cultures independently describe similar creatures using their distinct classification frameworks, the convergence suggests observation of actual phenomena rather than shared mythology. The seasonal timing of reported Mokele-Mbembe encounters follows patterns that align with known ecological cycles in the Congo Basin. Most sightings occur during specific months when water levels, vegetation growth, and animal activity patterns create optimal conditions for both creature movement and human observation. This temporal clustering suggests either genuine behavioral patterns or sophisticated cultural knowledge about when unusual wildlife encounters are most likely to occur. Hydrological studies of the Congo River system reveal complex patterns of water flow, seasonal flooding, and temporary connections between otherwise isolated water bodies. During peak flood seasons, normally separate lakes and rivers become interconnected through temporary channels, creating migration corridors that could allow large aquatic animals to move between distant locations. When floodwaters recede, these animals might become trapped in isolated pools, explaining why sightings are often reported from specific lakes or river bends. The acoustic environment of the Congo Basin presents unique challenges and opportunities for detecting unknown species. The dense forest canopy creates complex sound patterns where calls and noises can travel in unexpected ways, making it difficult to locate sound sources accurately. However, this same acoustic complexity means that unusual sounds might persist in the environment long enough for multiple witnesses to hear them, potentially explaining reports of strange vocalizations associated with Mokele-Mbembe encounters. Underwater acoustics research has identified sound signatures from various known species in Congo Basin waterways, but has also detected unidentified sounds that don't match any recognized animal calls. While these mysterious acoustic signals could have mundane explanations like geological activity or human-made noise, they represent another piece of the puzzle that researchers continue to investigate. The role of traditional healers and spiritual leaders in local communities adds another dimension to Mokele-Mbembe research. These individuals often possess specialized knowledge about local wildlife and natural phenomena that extends beyond common community knowledge. Their accounts of encounters with unusual creatures carry particular weight within their communities and often include detailed behavioral observations that wouldn't be found in casual sighting reports. Collaborative research approaches that combine Western scientific methods with traditional knowledge systems have proven successful in other conservation and biodiversity studies. Teams that work closely with local communities, respecting their expertise while contributing scientific resources and methodology, often achieve results that neither approach could accomplish independently. This collaborative model represents the most promising path forward for Mokele-Mbembe research. The psychological impact of spending extended time in remote wilderness areas affects researchers and local guides alike. The sensory deprivation, physical stress, and heightened alertness required for survival in challenging environments can alter perception and interpretation of sensory information. These psychological factors don't invalidate witness accounts, but they highlight the importance of corroborating evidence and careful documentation of encounter circumstances. Cultural anthropology research reveals that stories about powerful water creatures serve important social functions in many traditional societies, teaching respect for dangerous environments and reinforcing community bonds through shared narratives. Understanding these cultural roles helps researchers distinguish between accounts that serve primarily social functions and those that might reflect genuine biological observations. The evolution of research technology continues to open new possibilities for investigating cryptozoological mysteries. Environmental DNA sampling has become increasingly sophisticated, capable of detecting genetic traces from vanishingly small tissue samples or brief animal presence. Advanced camera trap systems can operate for months in harsh conditions, automatically documenting wildlife activity in areas where human observation would be impossible. Satellite imagery analysis combined with machine learning algorithms now allows researchers to identify potential animal paths, feeding areas, and habitat changes across vast geographic areas. These remote sensing techniques could theoretically detect signs of large animal activity, even in areas too remote for direct human investigation. The integration of multiple data sources through geographic information systems creates comprehensive pictures of habitat conditions, environmental changes, and sighting patterns that would be impossible to discern from individual pieces of information. This systematic approach to data analysis represents a significant advancement over earlier expedition-based research methods. International cooperation in Mokele-Mbembe research has improved significantly as political conditions in the region have stabilized. Collaborative agreements between universities, conservation organizations, and local governments have created framework for sustained research efforts that extend beyond individual expeditions. These institutional partnerships provide continuity and resources that individual researchers could never maintain. The training of local researchers and guides has become a priority for international teams, creating capacity for ongoing investigation and monitoring, even when foreign researchers aren't present. This capacity-building approach ensures that research continues between formal expeditions and provides employment opportunities for community members while advancing scientific knowledge. Conservation implications of Mokele-Mbembe research extend far beyond the potential discovery of a single species. The search efforts have contributed to mapping and documenting biodiversity in remote areas that might otherwise receive little scientific attention. Even negative results where target species aren't found provide valuable information about ecosystem conditions and wildlife populations. Protected area designation and management has been influenced by cryptozoological research in several cases where search efforts highlighted the conservation value of remote habitats. Whether or not legendary creatures actually exist in these areas, their cultural significance and potential biological importance justify protection measures that benefit entire ecosystems. The economic development of the region continues to accelerate, bringing new pressures and opportunities that will shape the future of both conservation efforts and cryptozoological research. Infrastructure development improves access for researchers, but also increases human disturbance in previously pristine areas. Mining and logging operations provide employment for local communities, but fragment habitat and degrade environmental conditions. Tourism potential related to Mokele-Mbembe searches represents both an opportunity and a threat. Carefully managed ecotourism could provide sustainable income for local communities while supporting conservation efforts. However, unregulated tourism could damage fragile ecosystems and interfere with both wildlife and research activities. The next generation of researchers brings new perspectives and technologies to cryptozoological investigation while building on decades of accumulated knowledge and experience. Young scientists trained in modern conservation biology, genetics, and ecology are applying rigorous scientific standards to questions that were once considered purely speculative. Educational initiatives in the region are creating awareness of both scientific research methods and conservation principles among local communities. These programs help ensure that future generations will be equipped to participate meaningfully in research efforts while maintaining their traditional knowledge system. As we peer deeper into the heart of this enduring mystery, the boundaries between science and speculation continue to blur. The absence of definitive proof doesn't diminish the importance of continued investigation, nor does it invalidate the experiences of countless witnesses who remain convinced they encountered something extraordinary. In the vast, largely unexplored wilderness of the Congo Basin, where new species are discovered regularly and ancient ecosystems persist largely unchanged, the possibility of remarkable discoveries remains tantalizingly real. The search for Mokele-Mbembe has evolved into something far greater than a simple creature hunt. It has become a multidisciplinary effort that combines cutting-edge science with traditional wisdom, international collaboration with local expertise, and rigorous methodology with openness to extraordinary possibilities. Whether the legendary creature represents a surviving prehistoric reptile, an unknown species awaiting scientific classification, or a complex cultural phenomenon that reveals important truths about human nature and our relationship with the wilderness, the investigation continues to yield valuable insights about biodiversity, conservation, and the limits of our current knowledge. In an era when satellite imagery can map every square meter of Earth's surface and genetic sequencing can identify species from microscopic tissue samples, the persistence of such profound mysteries reminds us that our planet still harbors secrets waiting to be discovered. The Congo Basin, with its ancient rivers and primeval forests, stands as one of our last frontiers, a place where the impossible might still prove possible, and where the next expedition might finally answer questions that have puzzled humanity for over a century. The story of Mokele-Mbembe ultimately transcends the simple question of whether a particular creature exists. It represents our enduring fascination with the unknown, our respect for traditional knowledge, and our hope that the natural world still holds wonders beyond our current understanding. As technology advances and exploration techniques improve, we edge closer to resolving this magnificent mystery one way or another. Until that resolution arrives, the legend continues to inspire researchers, captivate imaginations, and remind us that in the deepest heart of Africa, anything remains possible. The magnitude of this mystery becomes even more staggering when you consider the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. We're talking about an area of wilderness so vast that it dwarfs most countries. The Congo Basin spans over 2 million square kilometers of dense rainforest, winding rivers, and hidden swamplands. To put that in perspective, you could lose the entire state of Texas in there and still have room left over. Most of this territory has never been systematically explored by modern science. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of some regions deep in the Congo. The technological revolution of the past 2 decades has fundamentally changed how researchers approach this mystery. Gone are the days when expeditions relied solely on compass navigation and film cameras that might malfunction at crucial moments. Today's teams deploy an arsenal of sophisticated equipment that would have seemed like science fiction to earlier generations of explorers. Motion-activated trail cameras can operate for months in the harsh tropical climate, automatically photographing anything that passes by. Underwater remotely operated vehicles equipped with high-definition cameras can explore river depths that human divers could never safely reach. Hydrophone arrays listen continuously for unusual sounds beneath the water's surface, while acoustic monitoring stations throughout the forest record every noise that breaks the jungle's silence. But perhaps the most revolutionary advancement is environmental DNA sampling. This cutting-edge technique allows scientists to detect the genetic fingerprints that all living creatures leave behind in water and soil. Every time an animal drinks from a stream, defecates, or even brushes against vegetation, it deposits microscopic traces of its DNA into the environment. Researchers can now collect water samples from remote lakes and rivers, then analyze them in laboratories to identify every species that has been in the area recently. It's like having a guest book that every animal signs simply by existing in the ecosystem. The results of eDNA sampling in potential Mokele-Mbembe habitat have been fascinating, though not conclusive. Scientists have identified genetic material from dozens of known species, including elephants, hippos, various fish, and numerous smaller animals. They've also detected DNA from several species that weren't previously known to exist in those specific locations, expanding our understanding of animal distribution patterns in the region. Most intriguingly, some samples have yielded genetic sequences that don't match anything in existing databases. These mystery sequences could represent unknown species, degraded DNA from known animals, or contamination from unexpected sources. The absence of clear Mokele-Mbembe DNA doesn't necessarily prove anything definitive. Environmental DNA degrades rapidly in tropical conditions, where high temperatures, acidity, and abundant microorganisms break down genetic material quickly. If the creature exists in very small numbers and spends most of its time in deep water or secluded areas rarely visited by research teams, the chances of capturing its DNA in random samples would be extremely low. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the needle might dissolve before you locate it. climate monitoring stations throughout the Congo Basin have revealed dramatic environmental changes that could profoundly impact any large animals trying to survive in the region. Average temperatures have risen significantly over the past several decades, while rainfall patterns have become increasingly erratic. Some areas now experience severe droughts followed by devastating floods, creating a cycle of environmental stress that challenges even well-adapted species. The delicate balance that has maintained tropical forest ecosystems for millions of years is shifting in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. These climatic changes have cascading effects throughout the entire ecosystem. Plants that large herbivores depend on for food are flowering and fruiting at different times than in the past, disrupting feeding patterns that evolved over countless generations. Water levels in the rivers and lakes fluctuate more dramatically than before, potentially isolating animal populations or forcing them into unfamiliar territory. The thermal regulation challenges facing large-bodied animals in increasingly hot conditions could prove insurmountable for species already living at the margins of survival. Deforestation rates in the Congo Basin have accelerated alarmingly in recent years, driven by logging operations, agricultural expansion, and mining activities. Satellite imagery reveals that forest cover is disappearing at a rate of several million acres per year, fragmenting what was once continuous wilderness into isolated patches separated by roads, settlements, and cleared land. This habitat fragmentation creates island effects where animal populations become isolated from each other, unable to maintain the genetic diversity necessary for long-term survival. The psychological dimension of extended wilderness research reveals fascinating insights about human perception and the reliability of eyewitness accounts. Researchers who spend weeks or months in remote forest environments report profound changes in their sensory awareness and interpretation of natural phenomena. The constant vigilance required for survival in challenging conditions heightens all the senses, making individuals acutely sensitive to sounds, movements, and environmental changes that might go unnoticed in more familiar settings. This heightened awareness can be both beneficial and problematic for scientific observation. On one hand, experienced researchers develop an almost supernatural ability to detect subtle environmental cues that indicate animal presence or unusual activity. They can distinguish between the splash of a fish jumping and the sound of a large animal entering water. They recognize the difference between wind moving through vegetation and something large pushing through the underbrush. These finely tuned observational skills make them ideal witnesses for documenting unusual phenomena. However, the same psychological state that enhances perception can also increase the likelihood of misinterpreting ambiguous sensory information. When individuals are primed to expect extraordinary encounters, their brains become more likely to fill in gaps in sensory data with dramatic explanations. A partially glimpsed shape moving through water might be interpreted as something far more exotic than it actually is. The human mind's pattern recognition system, which evolved to identify potential threats and opportunities quickly, sometimes creates meaningful interpretations from random or incomplete information. The cultural significance of water creatures in Central African traditions extends far beyond simple folklore. These stories serve crucial social functions, teaching young people about environmental dangers while reinforcing community bonds through shared narratives. The specific details preserved in traditional accounts often reflect genuine ecological knowledge developed through generations of careful observation. When elders describe the seasonal movements, feeding preferences, and behavioral patterns of legendary creatures, they're drawing on collective wisdom that spans centuries of human experience in these environments. Linguistic analysis reveals that different ethnic groups throughout the Congo Basin use remarkably similar terms and concepts when describing large water creatures, despite significant differences in their languages and cultural practices. This convergence suggests either shared ancestral knowledge about real animals or independent observations of the same phenomena. The consistency of these traditional accounts across diverse communities strengthens their credibility as potential sources of biological information rather than purely mythological stories. Modern expeditions have learned to work much more collaboratively with local communities, recognizing that indigenous knowledge systems contain information that can't be found in any scientific textbook. Traditional guides possess intimate understanding of seasonal patterns, animal behavior, and environmental conditions that takes researchers years to develop. They know which areas are most likely to harbor unusual wildlife, when encounters are most probable, and how to interpret subtle environmental signs that indicate animal presence. This collaborative approach has transformed the entire nature of cryptozoological research. Instead of outsiders arriving with preconceived notions about what they might find, modern teams integrate local expertise from the planning stages through final analysis. Traditional knowledge holders participate as equal partners in research design, data collection, and interpretation of findings. This partnership model has proven successful in numerous conservation and biodiversity projects throughout Africa, leading to discoveries that neither Western science nor traditional knowledge could have achieved independently. The economic pressures facing Congo Basin communities create complex incentives around wildlife encounters and conservation efforts. Many local residents depend on forest resources for their survival, engaging in hunting, fishing, and gathering activities that bring them into close contact with wildlife. For these communities, unusual animal encounters aren't exotic adventures, but potential sources of food, medicine, or other valuable resources. This practical perspective on wildlife interactions provides a different lens through which to evaluate encounter reports. Tourism potential related to cryptozoological research presents both opportunities and challenges for local economic development. Carefully managed expeditions can provide significant income for communities through guide services, transportation, accommodation, and supply provisions. However, uncontrolled tourism can damage fragile ecosystems and disrupt both wildlife and local lifestyles. Finding the right balance between economic opportunity and environmental protection requires careful planning and strong community involvement in tourism development decisions. The training of local researchers has become a priority for international scientific organizations working in the region. Universities and conservation groups now offer educational programs that combine traditional ecological knowledge with modern scientific methods, creating a new generation of researchers who understand both approaches to understanding the natural world. These locally trained scientists can continue research efforts year-round, providing continuity that visiting international teams cannot maintain. Capacity-building initiatives have established networks of community-based researchers who monitor wildlife populations, document environmental changes, and investigate reports of unusual animal encounters. These local researchers often have access to areas and information sources that remain unavailable to outsiders, making them invaluable partners in ongoing scientific efforts. Their work continues even when international funding is unavailable or political conditions make outside research impossible. The question of what constitutes adequate proof for extraordinary biological claims remains hotly debated within the scientific community. The standard of evidence required to establish the existence of a new large vertebrate species is necessarily high, requiring multiple forms of corroborating information, including physical specimens, clear photographic documentation, and repeatable observations. This rigorous standard protects science from accepting false discoveries, but it also creates significant hurdles for documenting genuinely rare or elusive species. Recent advances in genetic analysis have lowered some evidentiary barriers by allowing species identification from minimal physical samples. A single hair, scale, or tissue fragment can now provide definitive genetic identification, potentially eliminating the need to capture or kill specimens for taxonomic verification. However, obtaining even these minimal samples from extremely elusive animals in vast wilderness areas remains enormously challenging. The broader context of species discovery in tropical ecosystems demonstrates that our catalog of Earth's biodiversity remains woefully incomplete. New species are discovered regularly in the Congo Basin, including relatively large mammals that manage to avoid scientific attention for decades or centuries. The recent identification of several new primate species in the region proves that significant animals can remain unknown to science even in our modern era of satellite surveillance and genetic analysis. These ongoing discoveries suggest that the theoretical possibility of unknown large species existing in remote areas cannot be dismissed simply because such animals would be unprecedented. The history of biological discovery is filled with examples of creatures that seemed impossible until physical evidence proved their existence. The platypus was initially dismissed as a hoax when European scientists first encountered specimens. Giant squids were considered mythological until relatively recent photographic evidence confirmed their existence. The intersection of traditional knowledge and modern technology creates unprecedented opportunities for biological discovery. Satellite imagery can now be used to verify traditional accounts of animal migration routes, seasonal gathering areas, and habitat preferences. GPS tracking allows precise documentation of locations where encounters occur, creating databases that can reveal patterns invisible to individual observers. Digital photography and video recording provide permanent documentation that can be analyzed by experts worldwide. However, the same technologies that enhance research capabilities also facilitate the creation of increasingly sophisticated hoaxes. Digital manipulation tools make it possible to create convincing fake photographs and videos that can fool even experienced researchers. This technological arms race between genuine documentation and fabricated evidence raises the evidentiary bar even higher, requiring multiple independent sources of confirmation for any extraordinary claims. The role of social media in spreading information about cryptozoological encounters has fundamentally changed how reports are collected, verified, and analyzed. Witnesses can now instantly share their experiences with global audiences, complete with photographs, videos, and location data. This immediate dissemination allows for rapid expert analysis and community discussion that can help distinguish genuine encounters from misidentifications or hoaxes. Yet, the same social media platforms that facilitate legitimate scientific communication also enable the rapid spread of misinformation and fabricated content. False reports can go viral before experts have time to evaluate their credibility, creating widespread belief in questionable claims. The democratization of information sharing has both positive and negative implications for cryptozoological research. The psychological appeal of mystery creatures taps into deep human fascinations with the unknown and our complex relationship with the natural world. In an era when satellite imagery has mapped every square meter of Earth's surface and GPS devices can pinpoint our location within feet, the possibility that large unknown animals might still exist captures our collective imagination. These mysteries represent some of the last frontiers of terrestrial exploration, places where genuine discovery remains possible. The cultural significance of cryptozoological research extends beyond simple scientific curiosity to encompass broader questions about human relationships with wilderness and wildlife. Stories of legendary creatures embody our simultaneous fear and fascination with untamed nature, reflecting psychological needs that persist despite our increasingly urbanized and technologically mediated existence. The search for these creatures becomes a form of pilgrimage to places where the modern world hasn't yet imposed complete order on natural chaos. Educational implications of cryptozoological research include valuable lessons about scientific methodology, critical thinking, and the evaluation of evidence. Students who study these mysteries learn to distinguish between different types of evidence, understand the importance of peer review and replication, and appreciate the challenges involved in documenting rare natural phenomena. The interdisciplinary nature of cryptozoological investigation exposes students to anthropology, ecology, psychology, and technology applications in ways that traditional coursework might not achieve. Public engagement with cryptozoological research demonstrates widespread interest in biological discovery and environmental conservation. Television documentaries, books, and online content about mysterious creatures attract audiences who might otherwise show little interest in scientific research. This popular fascination creates opportunities to communicate broader messages about biodiversity conservation, ecosystem protection, and the importance of scientific research funding. The methodological evolution of cryptozoological research reflects broader trends in biological fieldwork toward more systematic technology-enhanced approaches. Modern expeditions incorporate rigorous experimental design, statistical analysis, and peer review processes that were often absent from earlier investigations. This increasing sophistication has lent greater credibility to the field while simultaneously making negative results more significant. Interdisciplinary collaboration has become essential for addressing the complex questions surrounding cryptozoological mysteries. Teams now include not just biologists and adventurers, but also anthropologists studying cultural aspects, psychologists examining witness reliability, technologists operating sophisticated equipment, and statisticians analyzing data patterns. This collaborative approach produces more comprehensive understanding than any single discipline could achieve independently. The conservation implications of cryptozoological research extend far beyond the potential discovery of individual species to encompass entire ecosystem protection. Areas identified as potential habitat for legendary creatures often represent some of the last remaining pristine wilderness on Earth. Whether or not the target species actually exist, these areas deserve protection for their biodiversity value and ecological importance. Protected area designation has been influenced by cryptozoological research, in several cases where search efforts highlighted the conservation value of remote habitats. The cultural significance of legendary creatures can provide additional justification for habitat protection that complements purely scientific arguments for conservation. Local communities often show greater support for conservation measures that acknowledge and respect their traditional knowledge and cultural values. International cooperation in cryptozoological research has improved dramatically as political conditions in many regions have stabilized and communication technologies have advanced. Collaborative agreements between universities, conservation organizations, and local governments create frameworks for sustained research efforts that extend beyond individual expeditions. These institutional partnerships provide the continuity and resources necessary for long-term, systematic investigation. The training of local researchers and the development of in-country research capacity ensure that investigation can continue even when international funding or political access is limited. This capacity-building approach creates employment opportunities for community members while advancing scientific knowledge and conservation goals. Local researchers often have access to areas and information sources that remain unavailable to outside teams. As we venture deeper into this labyrinth of evidence and speculation, one thing becomes crystal clear. The search for Mokele-Mbembe has evolved into something far more significant than a simple creature hunt. It represents a fascinating convergence of cutting-edge science and ancient wisdom, international collaboration and local expertise, rigorous methodology, and openness to extraordinary possibilities. Whether this legendary beast represents a surviving prehistoric reptile, an unknown species awaiting scientific classification, or a complex cultural phenomenon that reveals profound truths about human nature and our relationship with the wilderness, the ongoing investigation continues to yield remarkable insights. So, what does all of this mean? After more than a century of expeditions, countless eyewitness accounts, and millions of dollars spent on sophisticated equipment, we still don't have that smoking gun evidence that would convince the scientific establishment. But maybe that's not the point anymore. The search for Mokele-Mbembe has given us something equally valuable, a deeper appreciation for one of Earth's last great mysteries and the incredible biodiversity it protects. Whether this creature exists or not, the Congo Basin remains a treasure trove of undiscovered species and ancient ecosystems that deserve our protection. In a world where new species disappear before we can even catalog them, keeping an open mind about extraordinary possibilities isn't just reasonable, it's essential. The mystery endures.